So now let's work with rough surfaces inside of Cinema 4D. In order to do that, I'm going to take a simple plane material right here. So let's just use something like, all right, there you go, a cube for example. So let me just bring it over here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in. So now let's work with rough surfaces inside of Cinema 4D. To do that, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to bring in an object. For example, let's say I'm just going to bring the cylinder right here and let's work around with this. I'm just going to increase the height and with segments right here so that I can work around with the details later on. Anyways, you have this object right here. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to apply materials to this, especially rough materials. So I'm going to double click over here on the material and you can see that the material is here. I'm going to drag in the material onto this object right here. If I were to go to render view, you can see that this material is quite flat right now. So in order to work with the type of material, I'm going to go into basic and you can see that reflection is actually on, so I'm not going to worry about it right now. So there are three levels of rough surface settings. There's bump, there's normal, and displacement. Let us learn how those works. So I'm going to go into bump first, and once I turn this on, you can see that the bump setting is here. So you can see that there's something called texture here. So I'm going to click here, and let's work with something like noise. So I'm going to go to effects right here, and I'm going to work with something like a noise. Okay, noise is right here. Let me click on that and you can see that there's a bit of a noise right there. So right now you can see that there's a bit of a noise going on right there. Let me just render this out and you can see that how this looks in render now. And the noise is quite big right now and you can see that this is how it is working out, even though the surface is flat. So you can add some details on there. So now if we were to go inside, you can see that you can work around with the global scale. So I can actually decrease the global scale of the noise right here. Let me just decrease right around here and you can see that more details have started to appear. So if I were to press Ctrl R right here, you can see that more noise is there. This does not actually change the shape of the object itself, but it only changes how the light is reflected. So you can easily create rough surfaces. So now there's another way to control the object as well, and that's the normal. So I'm just going to drag this out, and over here what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy the same texture. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to create a new material right here. Let me just copy the same texture. So I'm going to go to texture. I'm going to copy shader right here, and on the new material I'm going to paste the shader. So I'm going to go to basic here and I'm going to turn on normals for this one, and let's paste the normal texture right here. So let's paste the shader right here. So you can see that normal actually looks quite a bit different right there. So I'm going to drag in the normals onto the second object. You can see that the outlook is a bit different. So if I were to press Ctrl R and render it out, you can see that this is how normal looks. So there's more level of depth to it right there. Again, normal is just an intense version of the bump mapping. So bump gives a soft look while normal gives an extreme look right over there. So that's how normal map actually works. So let's go to the third one. So I'm going to control and drag this out, and now I'm going to use the third displacement, and that is the displacement mapping itself. So I'm just going to create a new material, drag it on over here. And for this one, so I'm just going to delete these out. Seems like there's multiple materials being applied to this. I don't want that. I'm going to go over here at the top, and over here I'm just going to select the material right here. I'm going to go to the basic, and for this one let me turn on displacement. So I'm going to go to displacement, and in the texture I'm just going to paste the shader right here, and you can see that there's a bit of a bumping going on right there. Let me press Ctrl R and you can see that the displacement happens, and you can see the polygons is moving itself. So it is required for you to have multiple polygons for this. So otherwise this is quite flat, just like that. So I'm going to go over to the third cylinder right here, and I'm going to increase its polygon count. So to make it easy, I'm just going to add in a subdivision surface right here and make it a child of the subdivision surface. So I actually made subdivision tile. So I'm just going to make this a subdivision tile, just like that. And you can see that more has been added. So I'm just going to drag in the material right over here onto the subdivision surface, just like this. And once I press Ctrl R, you'll be able to see that the displacement map is actually working right now. But anyways, in the subdivision, seems like it is not smooth enough. So I'm gonna go over here, go to the object. Let me increase the factor of it, not too much because I do not want my computer to freeze. Anyways, I'm going to press Ctrl R, and you can see that more details is actually there once you do that. So if you want more details in your object, you can actually use this. So let's use this in a cool way. So I'm going to actually use a texture now in an object. So I'm just going to delete all of these objects right here. So I'm going to grab in something like a cube right here, and we're going to use the same settings. So let me just drag this up, and over here let's use something like a brick texture. So I'm going to double click on the material, drag it in over here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go on to the material right here, and then I'm going to go to the texture. So I'm going to apply a basic texture first, and you can see that I have 3 textures that I can choose from. I'm just going to use the first texture right here, and I'm going to press open, and there you go, the texture has been applied, as you can see, but it is quite flat, just like that. So now I'm going to press Ctrl R, and you can see that there's no no variation of light. Everything looks flat right now, and there's nothing else, a much interesting thing going on. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in some texture to it. So I'm going to go over here onto my basic settings, and then I'm going to add in bump first to see how that looks like. So I'm going to go on to the bump settings right here. On the texture, I'm just going to copy the same texture. So I'm going to copy the texture right here, copy the shader right here. I'm going to go on to the bump, I'm going to go into the texture, and I'm going to paste the shader right here. And once I paste, you can see that there's a subtle effect, and there's an effect already. You can see the white edges right there. If I were to press Ctrl R, there's a bit of an interest going on right here. So let me just go over here and add in some filters right here. So right now this is directly in black and white color, so that works best for a bump map. I'm going to go to the texture, and if you're using a colored image, you can actually use this filter. So I can go to the filter right here, and once you add in a filter, you can see that you have more control over this. So you can control the saturation as well. So you can bring down the saturation. If you're using a colored image, you can bring up the lightness or bring down the lightness, and you can see that subtle changes actually happen right here. You can also work around with the contrast, and there you go. That's how it actually works. So there's a bit of a color change, as you can see, and that's the texture. So if I were to press Ctrl R, you can see that the render actually happens, and there's a bit of details going on, and a subtle change is there. Gives much more natural look to it. So shader is the basic version. So I mean, like, the bump is the basic version. Let's use the other map now. So I'm just going to click here. I'm going to go to the basic. I'm going to turn off bump. Let me apply the normals over here now. So I'm going to go to the normal setting. I'm going to paste the shader right here. And for the shader, black and white image does not do. You actually need a colored image. And to do that, you can actually go to effects right here and go to normalizer. That actually changes it out like this in a normalizer shape. As you can see, there's no detail right here, but if I were to increase the strength right here, you can see that a bit of a detail actually starts coming up. So not much details are actually here, as you can see. So I can increase the blur offset or decrease the blur offset right now. I can actually increase the data levels to actually start getting the details, as you can see. And you can see that now this is actually very, very detailed. If I were to press Ctrl R, you can see that the texture is actually seen just like that. Okay, so if I were to go over here on to the material right here, go to the basic. If I were to turn off normals, you can see that it is quite smooth. But if I were to turn this on, you can see that the sharpness is actually seen. You don't actually go all the way this up. This is just for this lesson. You just do it subtly so that there's a bit of a change right there. The third one is the displacement itself. And now for this, I'm going to go to the displacement settings. I'm going to add in a texture right here. So I'm going to paste the shader itself, and you can see that the displacement is actually happening over here. If I were to press Ctrl R, however, you don't see anything happening. You actually need to increase the segments over here. So I'm going to say something like over 100 segments over here, 100 segments and 100 segments, so that we can actually see the displacement happening. So if I were to press Ctrl R, you can see that the displacement actually happens. It actually looks like a brick. Over here to the side, you can see that it is actually pulling out the polygonal shapes right here. So I'm going to go over here onto the polygonal shape right here. Let me just select this. And then on the displacement option, let me just go over here and see what else I can do to this. So I'm going to go over here onto the displacement. I'm going to add in a filter to make it a bit more smoother because everything is quite sharp right now. So I'm going to go over here on to the not effects but filter itself. I'm going to go inside the filter, and you can see that I can actually blur things out right here, which will help me smoothen out the texture. So I'm going to press Ctrl R, and over here you can see that this is the texture now, but once I smoothen it out a bit, you can see that it has smoothened out, and the result is quite awesome, as you can see. And you don't need to manually design everything is 3D, just like this. So you can just use this, and it really saves your time in modeling out. You can see that there's a bit of a gap. Ctrl R, and you'll really be able to see those details right there. So that is how you can use the rough surfaces editing technique inside of Cinema 4D. And in further lessons, we are going to learn how to work with shiny surfaces. So if you guys learned something as always, and as always, please like, comment, share, and subscribe.